Good afternoon, everybody. This is Alan Blumkin on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. We're here to do another episode of David Nemec's Old-Time Baseball History and Trivia with my guest David Nemec and Ian Kahanowitz, and we're going to discuss today baseball seasons from 1947 through 1951, which all of them were epic in their own way. So let's get started. Greetings, gentlemen.
Hey, good afternoon.
On with both of you.
Okay.
Pleasure to be here again.
Well, yeah, 1947, of course, was a watermark year because of the very simple fact that the Brooklyn Dodgers brought up Jackie Robinson, who was the first African-American baseball player in the major leagues since Moses and Fleetwood Walker back in Moses and Weldy Walker, back in 1884. So this, of course, combined with the Happy Chandler suspension of Leo DeRocher, it was a very, very wild year. In fact, Red Barber came out of the book a number of years ago called 1947, when all hell broke loose in baseball. So let's get started. David, do you have any memories of Jackie Robinson when he came up?
I do, and I also had a fleeting meeting with Jackie in 1954 in spring when the Dodgers were spring training in Vero Beach, and I was living in West Palm Beach. The Dodgers came up to play the Philadelphia A's at Nemec Stadium in West Palm Beach, which was also our high school field. And prior to the game, we would come out after school and have to wait till the exhibition games were over in order to use the field for practice. And when the A's played the Dodgers, the benches were close to the field and the players were right there. It was really meet and greet and rub shoulders. And Robinson came walking by me to get a drink of water, and people, there was a drinking fountain, and I remember people looking daggers at him from the seats, but nobody said anything, and he passed me and he kind of winked. And that was my meeting, one and only meeting with Jackie Robinson. But it was certainly a pleasure to watch him play.
Yeah, they still had segregated water fountains at that time.
Absolutely.
I imagine, yeah.
And he would have had to go into the stands to find a colored drinking fountain. He would have had to go into the stands and way up top. There was one way up top. That was the only one in the entire park. Well,
one of the reasons that I just got through with I'm reading the Paul Dixon biography of Leo DeRocher right now, and I just finished up that whole period of time, and Ricky wanted DeRocher to ease Robinson's transition into the major leagues, and DeRocher was suspended, still up in the air whether that was merited or unmerited, but when DeRocher was suspended, Ricky brought in Bert Schotten to manage them. And I don't know, if you've seen the movie 42, if you've seen how accurately is that depict what went on. Ian, do you have any?
I speak to Ronnie Rabinovitz. He has his own show, and he was the Jewish kid from Sheboygan, Wisconsin, who wrote Jackie. They became friends. See, I got a lot of information out of him. Of course, when Jackie died in '72, I was 2 years old, much younger than you fellas. But what people don't understand, it's good that Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier. Let's just put it this way: integration was very important, but it had a lot of side consequences, which we don't talk about, but which I'm going to throw it out to you guys here. One of the side consequences was the decline of the Negro Leagues. And when you look at the Negro Leagues at that time, their per capita in Negro communities was second only behind insurance companies. which made the leagues the second largest black-owned enterprises of the time. And due to baseball integrating, the Negro League's economic status began to diminish, and team owners and players began to panic. Everyone was going bankrupt in the Negro League communities and black communities across, because Effa Manley, who again owned the Newark Eagles, wanted whole teams to be swallowed up by the Major League Baseball so that the Negro Leagues could get paid and enjoy a similar prosperity, but it didn't happen. Only stars like Jackie Robinson and soon after Larry Doby, it depleted the whole community sense of this league that had been so instrumental the last 20-something years, near 30 years. That was huge. That was a consequence. Another thing people don't know, and Dixon points it out in his book, is the whole thing with McPhail on the Yankees. That was information I never knew. Did you guys know that he tried to stop integration?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. When that's coming out,
there were other owners.
It's 15-1. The Dodgers were the only one who voted in favor of it.
Yeah, and as Dixon points out, he was on the
mistake? I don't know if it was, because it's sort of doubtful. Beck would have voted against it. Beck supported the Indians in '86.
Beck wasn't on the Indians at the time. It was before he owned the Indians.
When was the vote taken?
It was after Landis died and before Robinson was signed.
Yeah, Beck didn't come in until later. You're right.
Yeah.
And like I said, the consequences were, McPhail, who was again on the Dodgers earlier in the 40s, he was the general manager, and DeRoche was the manager, and they butted heads. One was because of the betting or whatever, but McPhail sent a memo around to all the American League teams, and some of the things that he argues of is just so mind-numbing. And Dixon points it out in the book that Negroes are not up to standard to play in Major League Baseball. There is not one shred of ounce of any backing up other than his word on that. And I think that got me. I thought it's like every time I read something more on the time period, we're uncovering more layers upon layers. And of course, like Alan said, DeRoche was suspended due to gambling. This was, we don't know the truth. McPhail accused DeRoche of having gamblers as friends in Cuba, and DeRoche accused McPhail. And so DeRoche, I think, had to take the fall for it from Happy Chandler. But as Alan said, he was instrumental in getting Robinson on. And actually telling the players, look, I don't care if he's yellow, white, black, zebra. If he's going to help this team, you guys better get in line, because a lot more are coming. And that's another consequence, which is very important.
We'll never know if Ricky would have gone ahead with the integration in '47 if someone besides DeRoche had been the manager. Say even Bert Schotten had been the manager going into spring training in 1947, would the integration, even though it was not smooth by any means, been anywhere near as smooth as it were, if another manager had been in place at the time?
So let me ask you guys.
It's just, wonder what do you think, Ian? Was DeRoche really instrumental?
I think he was. I think he was. I think he was, and I think Bill Veeck was as well, because he brought on Larry Doby right after, and of course he brought in Satchel Paige for that great run in '48. But
48.
which we'll get to soon. But I want to ask you guys this question, because it's interesting. Dixon's book on DeRoche makes you think. We know DeRoche gambled throughout, even when Landis threw the book at him in '42, like we discussed on the last show. My thing is this. DeRoche still gambled on games. and he saw African American players had talent. He didn't care about color line. He wanted to win his bets. That's pure speculation on my point. But what do you guys think?
I don't know.
I think he wanted to win on the ball field more than he wanted to win his bets. But your gambling was definitely a very, very important part of his life and his thinking. And I would not be a bit surprised that if he stacked his lineups, in certain ways, or his pitching staffs and whatever, to help him win bets. And let's hope not to lose, but who knows? But I agree with you. Gambling is extremely important, but I think that winning baseball took precedence.
The guy had a tremendous number of faults, DeRocher, which is what I'm getting out of the book, which is, I've known for years because I lived through most of the period when he was managing the Giants and then later on the Cubs and Astros, but racism was not one of his faults. And he took over it. He was taking over a team. The 1947 Dodgers had a number of players that were born, like Dixie Walker and Kirby Higbee and
Preacher Rowe,
Bobby Bragan. Preacher Rowe wasn't there till '48 because he came over when he and Billy Cox came over in when they traded Dixie Walker to Pittsburgh after 1947. And these guys were brought up. In fact, there were quite a number of Southerners in the major leagues as players at that point, and the attitude had to change. And personally, I think what Robinson went through during his 2 years before he was able to start, hitting back in 1949, I think that cost him years of his life.
Yeah, I think I agree. I agree.
Well,
even Doby didn't have the career I think he could have had if he hadn't had to break the color line in the American League. And Robinson certainly eased the way for him, but it was still, I think, a very difficult journey for him to, emerge in Cleveland.
Yeah, they won the pennant that year. And in 1947, the Yankees won the American League pennant. And they played each other in a very raucous World Series, which featured the Floyd Bevins almost no-hitter, which was broken up in Game 4 by Cookie Lavagetto's game-ending double. Bevins walked 10 in that game, constantly putting men on base. And then in Game 6, DiMaggio hit that fly ball at Yankee Stadium where Gianfrido made that sensational catch. And that's the only time supposedly DiMaggio kicked the third rounding second base, and supposedly the only time he ever showed any emotion on the field. And then the Yankees came back and won the series in the 7th game.
It was an incredible series. And wasn't it the first one televised?
Yes,
I believe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was the first one that was televised.
And you know what else is important about 47? Joe DiMaggio beat Ted Williams out for the most valuable player by 1 point.
And he didn't have near the year that Williams had.
No, there were. I think, that was a real sham, I thought.
But that was Dave Egan and whoever else was writing for the Boston papers at the time.
Yeah, they really had it in for Williams, and that was
in fact, I was doing research a number of years ago on the hiring of Casey Stengel, which we'll get into by the Yankees, and we'll get into in a little bit. Dave Egan wrote a column that that was in Sporting News, the only thing that they'll get out of Stengel is laughs. He was wrong.
Yeah.
And the Yankee manager that year, for all you trivia buffs, was Bucky Harris, who had won the pennant World Series with the 1924 Washington Senators, and I believe still has the record for most years by a manager winning between World Series wins.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. And Harris then continued into managing to 48.
He might have managed Washington and the Detroit after that. He managed Washington, I think, 3 different times.
Yeah.
But then right after the 1947 series, in fact, the day after this 47 series ended, Larry McPhail sold out his interest. He'd gotten drunk the day before, after the game, seventh game. He sold out his interest in the team to Del Webb and Dan Topping for $2 million. Which, of course, now the Yankees are worth a couple of billion, so it was a drop in the bucket. And McPhail never was involved in Major League Baseball after that season.
Yeah, that was, I think, beginning with 47, and we're going to, we really can spend a lot of time on each season. I think these are the most exciting 5 years in baseball ever. And the pennant races were, incredible. Integration occurred. The minor leagues after the Second World War really exploded. There was 50-some minor leagues in 1946 where there'd only been a handful the year before, and this continued throughout the 40s. And as a result, there were an awful lot of good ball players out there.
The Pacific Coast League tried to become a third major league. They wanted to come into the major leagues intact and bring Major League Baseball out to the West Coast. And they were granted something called an open classification, which was somewhat like Puerto Rico being a commonwealth to the United States. It was neither a state or a territory, and the PCL became neither a major league nor a AAA minor league. It was somewhere in between. Of course, that never amounted to anything, but it did.
It had some consequences in that these teams really weren't officially farm clubs anymore of major league teams, even though they struck bargains with clubs to have their players farmed to them. These were clandestine deals for the most part. So the Pacific Coast League, in effect, became kind of an independent league for several years. And it was a very interesting league, actually. And we can talk about the minors. We can spend an awful lot of time on them, but probably we should just stick for now with the major league.
I just want to add one more thing. The Mexican League, very, very instrumental during this time.
Right, we didn't touch on that in 1946 and how it nearly had tremendous dire consequences on the major leagues, because a lot of major league players who felt they were underpaid. There was a major league union that started really one of the first effective unions that they were trying to launch in 1946. It never really came to fruition, but a lot of the players got tremendous offers from the Mexican League owners, and made the jump. And Pappy Chandler, who was then commissioner, as a result, banned the players, but we're going to meet up with them again in the late 40s because they became instrumental in pennant races when the ban was lifted almost over Chandler's dead body when he found out that they were taken to court. But we'll get to that, I think, a little bit later. But for 1948, we enter into one of the most exciting pennant races of all time in the American League, in my estimation. And admittedly, I'm a bit biased since I'm an Indians fan through and through. But there were 4 teams packed in tight into the pennant race going into September. The 4th team is forgotten for the most part today, the Philadelphia Athletics. They entered the September right in the race, but in their final 27 games they played in September, they went 11-16, and they lost 9 of their final 10 games. And they dropped completely out of the race, finally finishing 12.5 games behind. The Yankees, after a formidable win in 47, were right there for the entire season, and going into the final weekend, all they needed to do with the way things turned out was win their final 2 games against the Red Sox. And the Yankees, and not the Red Sox, would have ended the 1948 season tied with Cleveland. The Cleveland march to even tying for the title was rather incredible. Much of the credit has to go to a rookie pitcher named Gene Bearden, a left-hander who'd been in the Pacific Coast League and played against Casey Stengel's Oakland Oaks the year before. And Bearden in 1948 entered the morning of September 16th with a record of 14-6. Now, no major league pitcher that in the season had so few wins and yet came on to be a 20-game winner. Bearden in the final 18 days of the season won 6 games, including the playoff game, which occurred after the season. A 1-game playoff. The Red Sox won the flip. It was in Fenway Park. And I know Al has something to say about this, too. Bearden, a left-handed pitcher, was voted on by Cleveland to be their starting pitcher, even though he pitched his 19th win on Saturday, a complete game over Detroit. When the Indians lost the following day, they had to go to the Red Sox on Monday after the Red Sox swept the Yankees over the weekend. And Bearden was voted on by the team to face the Red Sox in Fenway, even though he's a left-hander with the Green Monster right behind him. And I know Al would like to talk some about the Red Sox starter that day.
Okay, the Red Sox, to the shock to everybody, Joe McCarthy, who was managing the Red Sox, started managing the Red Sox in 1948, picked a pitcher named Denny Galehouse, who at that point in the season was 8-7, and wasn't particularly good. And the story that I've read in several sources was that the Red Sox expected Mel Parnell, who was a rookie and had won 15 games that season, to start for the Red Sox. And supposedly the reason that McCarthy did not start Parnell was the fact that Parnell was a rookie.
And also he's left-handed.
He's left-handed, exactly, yeah.
They're right-handed hitters.
Yeah, and even though they had the Red Sox had a team basically that was tailored so well for Fenway. They had Ted Williams, they had Dominic DiMaggio, Vern Stevens, Johnny Pesky,
Billy Goodman,
and
Abbott's a good hitting catcher.
Yeah,
great, fine manager.
They had Bobby Dorr. They had a team really tailored for that ballpark, and they started Galehouse, and Boudreaux went 4 for 4 in that game, including 2 home runs, and they beat the Indians beat them 8-3. And that was the first of McCarthy's 2 seasons in a row where he wound up managing the Red Sox and losing both years by 1 game.
On the final day of the season.
And what happened with Bearden, the team that won in the National League in 1948 was very unexpected. It was the Boston Braves with Warren Spahn and Johnny Sane, and they had Eddie Stanky and Alvin Dark as their double play combination, and they managed to beat out the Dodgers, who had changed managers from DeRocha to Bart Schotten in mid-1948. DeRocha went on to manage the Giants, and they beat out the Cardinals, who also, Stan Musial had the best year of his career in 1948 when he led the league in every offensive category except for home runs. He was 1 short of Ralph Kiner and Johnny Mize. He had 39 that year. He led in average, doubles, triples, total bases, runs scored, RBIs, slugging, OPS, almost every measurable offensive category that season. And the Braves had won the pennant for the first time since 1914, and the Indians.
Hello?
Hi, I don't know what happened there.
No, that's all right.
Yeah. So I just called back in. As I was saying, George Weiss had taken over as the general manager of the Yankees after Topping and Webb bought out McPhail, and he and Casey Stengel had a relationship going back a number of years when they were both in the Eastern League in the late 20s. So he brought Casey Stengel, who had managed the Braves and Dodgers unsuccessfully for a number of years. And Stengel, when he came to the Yankees, he had...
Okay, Al, I'm back. I got cut off for some reason.
As David mentioned earlier, he had managed against Bearden, and he knew that Bearden had trouble getting his knuckleball over the plate and was totally dependent upon batters swinging at it. So he told everybody to lay off, and that was the...
well, others have noticed it too, actually. Other managers have noticed it during the 48 season and hadn't been able to take advantage of it. That there was a little more to it. Bearden did have some arm trouble in spring training. His knuckleball wasn't doing all that it had the year before. And once the 49 season began, and he never got back on track. But Stengel did certainly play a part. And Cleveland always had trouble with the Yankees. And
the Indians had in that off season had acquired Early Wynn and Mickey Vernon from the Washington Senators, and there were quite a number of people that expected them to repeat, but the whole infield, Joe Gordon, Lou Boudreau, and Ken Keltner all started to decline as ball players.
Sharply, very sharply and very suddenly. Yeah, they'd all had great seasons in 48. And Eddie Robinson, the first baseman, who was the only remaining survivor, I think, of the 1948 World Series.
So he went to the Washington in the trade where they got
Wynn and Vernon trade.
Wynn and Vernon, yeah.
But he was the infield consisted of four very good sluggers, and by 1940 standards, with Robinson, Gordon, Keltner, and Boudreau, was I think the first infield that ever had four guys who homered in double figures. As I recall, I think that's true. And but then when Vernon came over, Vernon was more of a gap and singles hitter. Although he did hit 3 home runs on one occasion for the Indians.
Yeah, he didn't last that long because when Luke Easter came up, they sent him back to Washington for one of the worst pitchers in the history of baseball, Dick Week.
Yeah, he was very well. It was pronounced White, but actually by the time he left the Indians,
look him up.
That was Dick Week.
Yeah, he couldn't get the ball over.
His walk
and the Yankees by that time had, in 1948 they had gotten Eddie Lopat from the White Sox for
Bill White, I think.
Bill White and Aaron Robinson, who then the White Sox turned Aaron Robinson to the Tigers for Billy Pierce, and they had gotten Allie Reynolds for Joe Gordon after 1946, and the Vic Raschi had come up, and this would be the start of the 5-season dynasty that the Yankees would put on from 1949 to 1953. And outside of the 3 pitchers who would be effective through the whole that whole period, the only 4 players that were playing more 100 games for each season were Yogi Berra, Phil Rizzuto, Gene Woodling, and Hank Bauer. The transition would go from DiMaggio to Mantle during that period. Whitey Ford would come in later on. The third base transition would go from Billy Johnson and Bobby Brown to Gil McDougald.
Andy Carey.
Yeah, Billy Martin would come up, but obviously the biggest one of that whole period would be the DiMaggio to Mantle transition. So the Yankees came on in 1949. They were struck by, they had about 75 players, 75 games where they couldn't put their full lineup up there. Tommy Henrich was the first baseman at that time. He was in his declining seasons, and somehow they managed to keep pace with the Red Sox. Now, the 1949 Red Sox were incredible. They wound up winning 96 games that year, and their record at home was 61-16, and their record on the road was 35-42. They were a tremendous offensive machine. The problem was once you got beyond Ellis Kinder and Mel Parnell on the pitching staff, the two of them won 48 games between them. They really didn't have much. And the Yankees beat them the last 2 days of the season to win that pennant. And he also had a race that's very overlooked in the National League, where the Dodgers had to win the last day of the season to beat the St. Louis Cardinals out by 1 game.
1 game, yeah.
And the Cardinals are going to a free fall after that season. As David told me when we discussed this a while back, basically because of the decline of their pitching staff. So the Yankees then beat the Dodgers in the 1949 World Series in 5 games. And it was the Dodgers by that time had all the cast of characters who would be immortalized as the Boys of Summer on their team. And it would be the start of a really, really tremendous rivalry that would last basically until the Dodgers pulled up stakes and went out to California.
I think also in the...
Ian, go ahead.
No, right. Dan, if you want to go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that in the 49 season, Dodgers won by 1 game. The 46 season, they had lost in a playoff. The 47 season, they won. The 48 season was the only season in these 5 seasons between 47 and 51 where they finished, either didn't win the pennant or finished more than a game out of first place. And if the final day of the season had gone a different way, in 46, 50 and 51, the Dodgers would have won 5 straight pennants.
Oh, the Dodgers
comes down to.
In 1950, the last game was to force a playoff.
Well, it would have forced a playoff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's true.
We get to 1950, and
Ian had something, I think, in 49.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you gotta understand the end of the 1940s, 1949, huge. DiMaggio signed the first, 6-digit contract, $100,000. The 49 All-Star game was at Ebbets Field and had the first black players, including Jackie Robinson, Roy Campanella, Don Newcomb, and Larry Doby. Not only that, but the last new diamond that was created was Municipal Stadium, which opened in 32, but now we have a new ballpark, and we have all these contracts going around, including Milwaukee County Stadium, which would be a few years later would be unveiled. But and of course integration. You had about 8 teams, 8 African Americans on major league teams, the Dodgers, Indians, Giants, and by the end of the season, the Braves.
Yeah.
St. Louis Browns had 2 black players in 47 also.
Yeah, one of them was Henry Thompson, who would later go to the Giants.
And the other was
Willard Brown, who's in the Hall of Fame as a Negro League player.
Yeah.
Very revolutionary, the 1940s, from both of our programs.
In fact, it was amazing how when Don Newcomb came to the Dodgers that a lot of the other National League pitchers stopped throwing at Robinson.
One thing we should touch on is night baseball. The Tigers were the last American League club to install lights in 1948. And between 1948 and the time the Cubs installed lights, every other team had lights. The Cubs were, really, really maintained night baseball long after all the other clubs. Maintained day baseball, I'm sorry, long after all the clubs had gone to playing either close to half or more than half, in many cases, of their games at night. And So this, and they were also bringing in twilight doubleheaders in the 1940, which were very revolutionary. The game would start in daylight, and the lights would be turned on in the course of the first game. Usually, the second game would be played under the lights. Now I mentioned this because there was a rule in effect then. If you started a day game, not a twilight doubleheader, you could not put on the lights during the course of the game. So there were many games in the 1940s that would start, particularly the second game's a doubleheader, and would be called because of darkness, because teams were not allowed to put the lights on. I don't recall exactly when the rule was put in, giving them the right to do that. But it wasn't until after the 1947 season, I know, it may have been 1948, when the Tigers put in lights.
Yeah, well, another thing I want to bring up that after 1946, which was a down offensive year, the hitting, especially in the American League, dominated the game. In fact, in 1949, the Detroit Tigers were the only pitching staff that had more strikeouts than walks, and that was by 3. So it was very tilted toward hitting. In 1950, the Red Sox would hit 302 as a team and score over 1,000 runs and finish in third place.
Well, the explosion of walks in the American League in particular was a phenomenon that's really never been adequately explained to my thinking. And it still lingers for researchers to examine those seasons carefully.
Because if you look at 1952, especially in the American League, essentially the same cast of characters that you had there in 1950, and all the offensive, all the pitching numbers are up, and all the hitting numbers are down. So they were playing footsie with, may have been the composition of the baseball because
I think it was a strike zone.
Yeah, we were in the Korean War at that point. But it's something that's always intrigued me. And in 1950, you had the Yankees again. In fact, it was so, the American League was so crazy that the Yankees won, I believe, 98 games. Detroit was second at 95. Boston was third at 94, and Cleveland was fourth at 92. The fifth team was the White Sox, who won 69 games that season.
Yeah.
And there's a 23-game gap between fourth and fifth place. So basically, the top 4 teams beat the living daylights out of the bottom 4 teams the entire season. And a lot of players in the American League, especially, even guys like Yogi Berra and Larry Doby, and Phil Rizzuto, who are Hall of Famers, had their career years at that point. And,
it was remarkable.
Yeah, the Yankees won by 3 games over the Detroit Tigers. There's people who feel that the reason the Tigers lost, and that was the only year that they were really a contender during that time, is because Virgil Trucks, who was one of their pitching aces, came down with a sore arm and missed most of that season. And in the National League, you had the Whiz Kids from Philadelphia, because the Phillies had been, have gone through a period from 1918 through 1948 where they only finished with a winning record once. They had two games above 500 in 1932. And all of a sudden, when the Carpenters bought the team, Carpenter family bought the team in 1944, they started developing players, and by 1948, 1949, they had the core of the what would be the Whiz Kids. In fact, some of these players would be the core of that team through the next 6-7 years. And somehow, despite losing one of their star pitchers, Kurt Simmons, to the military in early September of 1950, another starter, Bubba Church, was hit in the face with a line drive off the bat, Ted Kluszewski, in September, and another starter, Bob Miller, who had won 11 games, came down with a sore arm. They still managed to hang on to beat the Dodgers out by 2 games. The last game of that season was the famous game where Dick Sisler hit a home run in the 10th inning after Dodger player Cal Abrams had been thrown out at home plate with the winning run in the bottom of the 9th by Richie Ashburn. And
yeah, that was a really memorable moment, and I've only seen it on film, but Ashburn did not have a great arm.
No, I know that. Yeah.
But the third base coach, and who was it? Milt Stock.
Milt Stock, yeah.
Milt Stock. Okay, it was questionable whether he should have sent Abrams, even though Abrams represented the tying run, because it was
the winning run. He represented the winning run. Yeah.
Well, the winning run, yeah.
Yeah.
Ashburn was playing fairly shallow, and from the film I saw, the footage, it looked like he was caught it on that single on like one hop or so, and then he didn't make a great throw, but it was a decent throw. And as I recall, Abrams was out by quite a bit.
Yeah. And what they did, they walked Jackie Robinson after that play to reload the bases, and they got Ferraro to pop up, and then Hodges hit what would have been a sacrifice fly, but it was the third out. And then, Dick Sisler, a 3-run home run off Newcomb in the top of the 10th, and that was the ball game. And the Dodger fans after that felt it couldn't get worse, but it would.
It does.
In the World Series, the Phillies were so depleted that the Yankees were able to beat them in 4 straight. 3 of the games.
That was the closest 4-game World Series ever. Every game I think was 1 run, pretty much.
Yeah, the Yankees shut them down almost totally offensively.
Yeah.
And years later, they asked Richie Ashburn why Whiz Kids never repeated. They would finish 3rd, 4th, 5th place most of the time that they were there afterwards. And Ashburn said, simple, no blacks.
Yeah.
Because they were the last team in the National League, the original 8 to, break the color line. So now we get to 1951. Now, you're living outside New York. It wasn't too good a year, but New York never had a season like that. We had the 3 teams, 1 team winning the pennant and the other 2 tying for it in the National League. Now, do either of you believe the Echoing Green story where the Giants had the system telegraphed?
I believe it. I believe parts of it. I don't think it was instrumental in what happened. I really don't. Even having played enough ball, even if you know what pitch was coming, for most hitters it's not a great advantage. Most hitters it's batting is, I don't know. And I think there were members of the Giants who were even interviewed about this and said that they did not want to know what was coming. They preferred not to know. They wanted to go up there and be looking on their own. But that, if it's true, I mean, it does raise questions about the legitimacy, I suppose, of the Giants' surprising comeback. But what do you think?
Well, my take on it is, first of all, DeRocha did did a tremendous job of managing. They brought up Willie Mays, who was 20 years old at the time. He switched Monty Irvin and Whitey Lockman. He moved Lockman from the outfield to first base, and Monty Irvin, who was on record hating playing first base, to the outfield. They moved Bobby Thompson from center field to third base because Hank Thompson was having personal problems during that season. And the Dodgers, I think, Charlie Dresden, I think, mismanaged the team, especially the last 2 months. He burned out their ace relief pitcher for the first half of the season, Clyde King, who came down with arm trouble. He in the middle of the season, he misused Clem Labine. He Dressen held grudges. And Labine dissipated an order of his, and he pitched from a windup in a game against the Phillies. And Willie Pudenhead-Jones hit a grand slam home run off of him. He refused to use Labine after that until he was forced to use him in the second game of the playoffs. Meanwhile, the starters, Newcomb, Rowe, Erskine, and Branco, by the time that season ended, their arms were hanging off. They had been used so much. And I just think, the Dodgers were totally mismanaged during those last 2 months of the season. They played. They had a 13.5 game lead with approximately 6-7 weeks to go, and they played a little bit over 500. For that period, the Giants, of course, went on a 37-7 run, and caught them and beat them in the playoff on the Thompson.
I don't think there's ever been a finish like that
in
Major League history. Nothing even close that I can recall.
But telling about the Dodger bullpen when Newcomb ran out of gas in that final game, the pitchers that he had warming up in the bullpen were Carl Erskine and Ralph Branco, both of whom were regular starters.
Yeah.
And it was, I just think that, in my opinion, Charlie Dressen as a manager is extremely low.
Yeah, well,
and the Yankees that year, saw the transition starting from Joe DiMaggio to Mickey Mantle. Mantle came in and he was, had a sensational spring, and he was supposed to replace one of the greatest icons in Yankee history. And they expected a lot of things out of a 19-year-old kid out of the backwoods of Oklahoma. It was tough.